are going to try and figure out a filtration system here. So this is our plan. We're going to use a old pop bottle. I'm going to cut it, and we're going to turn that over, and then we're going to put our different layers in here to create the filtration system. But before we go elaborate, we're going to just test out some simple ways to see if we can filter water with just everyday items that you might have in your house. Given that it's COVID time, you might have a mask. So we're going to see how well that does on its own. Another thing that you may or may not have, probably less likely, is one of these kind of paint filters that you would filter your paint before you put it through a sprayer. We also have some paper towel and coffee filters. So those are kind of your basic household items that you may or may not have. And then for going a bit more elaborate in our bottle system, we're going to layer up a couple different layers of different materials that, again, you'll find around your house. Maybe not inside your house, but also outside. So if you go to the bathroom and look in your cosmetics drawer, you might have some cotton balls like this. We're going to use 3 layers of sand / small pebbles that'll help filter out larger to smaller sediments in the water. So we have some fine sand. We have some pebbles here, which I got out of my fish tank, but you might have them in your yard. These would be more likely in your yard, some larger kind of river rock pebbles. If you go out to your barbecue, if you have the barbecue coals, charcoal coals, like these, those will work really nicely as a carbon filter, which is important in a filtration system. As you can see here, I've crushed some down into some powder. And then, of course, to test it, we're going to have dirty water here, which we've mixed some dirt, which you found in the yard, into the water to make a dirty water that would simulate collecting water that is not filtered. Another thing that I was thinking about is that one could use, if one has fish in the house, fish tanks actually have a great filtration system in them because fish essentially live in their own waste. So if you have a fish tank, you might have regular filtering, sort of like a scouring pad-ish type thing. You might have carbon filter, which again is similar to your charcoal. You might have carbon flakes. And then sometimes you have these kind of rock things that'll filter out sediment and different impurities. So, having said that, we're going to give this a go. We're going to start with a couple maybe more ridiculous, probably not high chance of success items, such as the mask, the paint filter, maybe just a plain sheet of paper towel, and a coffee filter. And we'll see how cleaner the water will come out with just those. And after that, we will build our filtering device. So we're going to use this canning filter to put our little filtration device, materials into for our initial test. As you can see, Felix is stirring in the muddy water, so that'll be nice and dirty. So first of all, we'll try the mask. What we're going to try and do is just have the mask in there so that it doesn't pour around the edges and that it all goes through the mask. And now Felix is going to be our helper, and he's going to pour just a bit of dirty water in. Kan du hälla lite vatten där inne? Så här. Okay, and we're pouring. Okay. So, this will also be a test as how effective our masks might be. There have been a lot of people who have been claiming that one can just spray water through these things really effectively. And I'd say at this point that a mask might be too effective as a filter, as this one isn't actually letting anything through. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to go off camera and we're going to transfer this to a little yogurt jar and have it sit on the side for a while. Check out how effectively the stuff is going through here. So as you can see, the water is like catching in there. It's not going through. What we might do is when we come back, we might like use our finger to rub it around in there to get it to come through. So we're going to move on to the next one, the paint filter. We'll put that in our little funnel cup. And Felix, let's pour some more in here. Ooh. Okay, so this one, it'll catch all of that dirt. But as you can see, the water is not clean. So we'll just pour that water back through, and we're gonna give this paint can a 1 out of 10. Next, we'll try just some paper towel. So we'll take this paper towel and we'll kind of bunch it in there. And now, Felix, let's try again. It's not going through quite as fast as the paint filter. And what we'll probably see here is that it's caught a lot of the mud. We hold this up. It's caught a lot of the mud out of there, but if we look at the water, it's still kind of, you wouldn't want to drink that. So let's pour that back. And we'll move on to the next. We'll try a coffee filter. So go ahead, Felix, pour some in there. So what we're finding with these is these are doing a pretty good job at getting the big flakies out. But they're still not, whoops, oh, coffee filter failed. Ran through the sides a bit, so we'll give that another go. And as we can see with this one, is that once again, the coffee filter has done a pretty good job at catching some of those flakies, but the water is still pretty dirty. So, what have we learned from this? We've learned that if you just use individual filters, that might not be quite enough. They do the job of catching the big flakies, but what do we do to catch out all of those tiny little things? And that's where, if we use a system with large rocks that would be designed to catch any twigs or larger pieces of sediment, followed by fine rocks. Yeah, it's not. Followed by sand, and then some charcoal. And I've done some research and noticed that a lot of people suggest using coffee. We're not going to use coffee in our example because I think that might add color to the water and therefore not give a clear indication. Yeah? Soon. The main way of telling whether this is working is if the water comes out clear. I'm curious to see how the charcoal will do, because most systems do recommend you have charcoal. And then we may put a coffee filter in there, but the key is the cotton balls right in the bottom. And I've mentioned these from large to small, but when we fill them into the bottle, we're going to go from small to large. So it goes through those in that order. So we're going to build this filtering device. The first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to cut this bottle in half, creating kind of a funnel and then a catchment area that the clean water will go in. We're going to use a knife, but one point we want to point out is whenever we're using any sharp knife like this, we want to be careful that we don't cut ourselves accidentally. So we always cut away from ourselves and we do it carefully. And if you're younger, maybe you get an adult to help you. So we're just gonna start, not quite yet, Felix, by getting that poked in there. And we're just following along. And once you've gotten that started, you could switch over to a scissor if you wanted. But we're just cutting a nice, as straight a line around the outside as possible so that we have two nice halves. At the end, you can maybe try to just pull them apart, and they shouldn't be too sharp. Store your knife safely away. Now we have a top half that sits in the bottom half. Obviously, we'll take this little one off, but you can keep the cap to be able to screw back on. That way, once you're done filtering, you just screw the cap on and you can store it like this without worrying about any leftover water going through. Felix, we're gonna put together this first, so we don't need the water right now. So let's put the water away over here. As you can see, for all of those who claim that the masks don't do a good job, this has been sitting here about 15 minutes and there's still all that water sitting with the weight of gravity, and it's barely poured. It's actually gone, not a single drop has come through. So this is a very effective way of keeping, I mean, if you've got that much goober coming out of your nose, maybe you should go to get a test. So we're gonna start here. We're gonna start with some cotton balls. Okay, Felix, can you put some cotton balls to the bottom there? Yeah, one, we'll maybe put two. Let's see. Two seems good. So we'll save the third one for later. Now, what we could do is, at this point, is we could add a coffee filter in here.
And what?
But I'm not going to do that because I feel like that might slow down the flow rates. If we find that we're not filtering quite well, we might try that later. We're going to start with sand, Felix, okay? So as we can see here, we have our cotton. Oh, before our sand, we're going to put some charcoal. So we'll take our charcoal here. There's still some bigger pieces in there, so we're going to get rid of those bigger pieces because we want just a fine dust. Okay, Felix, let's pour some charcoal in there. Here. There we go. That's nice. We'll maybe put in a nice good layer down at the bottom there. And the cotton should actually catch most of any coloration that we get from the charcoal. There's a couple bigger pieces here I'm taking out. Anything smaller than 1/4 inch should be fine to leave in. So now we'll pour in some more here. You can see we've got probably about an inch or two. Yes, now, no, not in there. Oh well, that's fine. We'll clean that out later. Let's pour some sand in here. Okay, candian también, Felix? So, okay, and we're going about 1 to 2 centimeters of sand in the bottom there. We'll give that a shake to see. We want to see nice clean layers. We'll go a bit more in here. Okay, before we do some rocks, Felix, we're going to do some bigger rocks. Okay? Huh? Can we hold on me? Again, we're going about. Now what I've done with these is I've pre-washed them because they came from outside in my yard. These came from my fish tank. Go a bit more than there. And now you can see we've got the charcoal, we've got the sand, we've got the bigger rocks. Now we're gonna go even bigger rocks. Now, you don't want to fill this too full because we do still need some space to be able to pour the mucky water in. And now we have our filtration system. I have no idea how many liters this would do. Obviously, the more water you filter, the longer it's going to, the more it's going to fill up with sediment and the longer it would take to filter water. and it might eventually stop filtering water. So we're gonna set up a time lapse of this because I feel like it might take some time to filter through, but I'll show you the dirty water here that we have. It's nice and gray. It's got some good chunkies in there. We'll actually take here and scoop another scoop of dirt in there. And yeah, and there's a nice little flaky leaf. We'll make sure that that comes in. I think that's enough dirt. Can you give that a stir, Felix?
Yeah.
Okay, you stir that. I'm gonna wash out this bowl so that we have a clean bowl to collect in. You stirred the dirt, great. Actually, we didn't need this bowl, but we'll put it in here anyway, just so that if for some reason something goes crazy. We're gonna take off the end here, and we're gonna rest that in there, put that in there, and now, okay, Felix, here it is. We stirred it. Make sure that we get some of that good grimy stuff on the bottom, which really isn't gonna do much. It's just gonna sit on top. Okay, pour all of this, oh, slowly, 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 slowly. There we go. All right. You can see there, that's pretty gross. So I'm going to set this camera up. We're gonna put this right here. Oops. And we're gonna zoom in on it. And I'm gonna switch this to a time lapse. So as you can see, the water on top looks pretty gross. But if you look down there, it's dripping through fairly good. And it's not crystal clear. We'll see once we have all of the water. But it is definitely doing a filtration job. So it's time for results now. And as you can see, it's finished filtering out. So all of the water managed to go through the filtration system, so that's good. And if we take this out here, we can take a look at the water, which obviously is not crystal clear. But if we need a bit of a reminder, this is what it looked like before. So if we pour ourselves a nice little glass there, and you can see in the bottom, there's still all that dirt in there. And now if we compare it with this glass over here, we can see between the two that there is a vast improvement. Now, if we imagine this maybe like apple juice rather than other imaginative liquid, we can see that it's actually improved quite a bit to the murky water. Probably not something that I'd want to drink a whole bunch of on a regular day, but if I were trying to survive, I would definitely give it a try. So, just to recap, murky water, filtered water. Wouldn't want to drink that. But to put my money where my mouth is, I'm going to give this a taste. It's a bit earthy, but not too bad. So we're going to take this a step further, and we're going to filter that filtered water one more time. So, and again, as a reminder, on the right, we have the murky water. In the middle, we have the filtered water. And on the left, we're sending it through once more. So we'll check back in a couple hours and see what the twice filtered water looks like. So this is the murky water to the right, the once filtered water in the middle, and the twice filtered water on the left. As you can see, the twice filtered water didn't really improve much. And that could be just because it was filtered quite well the first time, or it could be because there's sediment and such in the filter now that it's just picking up and then dropping back off again. You'll also notice that the murky water on the right has settled. That's because I left it overnight. So we're gonna do one final test where we take this settled water and pour it through, thereby reducing the amount of sediment that's being caught in the filter, and we'll see if that comes out any cleaner than the originally filtered or the twice filtered water. So we're gonna pour this carefully so as not to agitate it too much into the filter again. As you can see, there's all that sediment at the bottom, and now we will see what comes out through the filter. So another update here. On the right, we have the sediment left over from the water, the murky water, which was allowed to settle overnight. In the middle to the right, there's this single filtered water. In the middle to the left, there's the double filtered water. And on the far left side, there's the water that was poured gently from the settled cup through the filter. As you can see, there isn't much variation in the clarity of the water. They all have that yellow hue to it. So there's some sort of color associated with the water from the mud originally that isn't getting filtered out. So we're gonna take a couple further steps to see if we can improve the clarity of this water. So I've decided we're gonna start from scratch for this second variation. We're gonna go with new sand, small pebbles, rocks, and rather than the charcoal, we're gonna go over here with this activated carbon, which came from my fish tank. Again, something that you might have in a regular household. And I feel like maybe with the activated carbon, it might give clearer looking water than the charcoal briquettes there. What we're also gonna do is we're going to rinse the sand and the pebbles so that there isn't any sediment in the filter to begin with. So, starting with this, we're going to take all that hard work that we did and we're going to dump it out. And we're gonna rinse this out and start from scratch. So this is what's for supper. And this is another crazy idea. So I've been thinking about purifying water, and I figured that it's one thing to purify sediment out of water, but who knows where the water source is from and what kind of bacterial content might be in it. So what's the best way of killing bacteria is to boil it. So I figured maybe one could do a 2-for-1 where one boils the murky water and then tries to collect it in this jar, and hopefully that sediment it'll be too heavy to go up with the boiling. I have no idea whether this will work or not. I'm pretty sure it'll kill any sort of bacteria that's in it, up to 99.9%. I mean, it's about the same as mixing it with hand sanitizer, but we don't really want to drink hand sanitizer. So the idea is that I have this bowl, I put this jar in the middle, and I created this copper wire bracing system to keep the jar in the middle. So I'm gonna boil the water, which will then collect on the underside of the tin foil and then run down to that midpoint and hopefully drop into that jar. To help it drop down, I'm actually gonna put some ice on top of the tin foil to help cool it down. Obviously that ice will melt and probably need to be scooped away and replaced, or maybe just the cold water will be enough to condense that water on the inside. So this ice wouldn't have to be clean water. I mean, I know we're in a situation where we don't have any clean water, so it could just be frozen dirty water. Could be ice from outside. It's winter right now, so ice or snow. But I'm just going to use probably some snow since I don't have any ice cubes. So we'll give this a try and see how it works. So here we have the murky water. We have some snow. We have this tin foil that'll fit right on here. So I'm going to turn the stove on to hot. Again, if you're doing this, make sure to be careful and not do anything that'll end up burning yourself. And we're going to just pour along the side here. And you can see we've got all of that dustiness, dirtiness. It's pretty gross. What we'll actually do is we'll take this out for a second and try and get all of that dirt in there. Take a little spoon, stir it all up. And now we can put this contraction back in there, and then we'll put the tin foil over top. And to start, I'm going to take this pot lid and put it on there just so that it heats up a bit faster. And once it's heated up, then I'll take the pot lid off and we'll put that snow on top to help condense the water and see if we can get some nice clean water in that middle jar. As you can see, it's boiling pretty good. So we're going to cover this up here to try and seal that in. And we're going to take a handful of this snow and just put it on the top there so that any steam collects on the tin foil and hopefully drips into that middle container. So there's a lot of steam going out of the edges, but again, if we look in there, it's collecting on the bottom of there. I have a suspicion that this is not going to be a very effective method to do it for large volumes. It's probably going to take quite a long time to get any meaningful amount, but and yeah, definitely the amount of energy put into this is probably not worth the amount of water that one's getting out of it. But it's interesting to know, maybe one could create a better system that uses this concept to separate the water or to treat the water for parasites for sure, and we'll see if it separates out the dust or dirt that was in the murky water. So we're going to take a final look in here and see what it's like. As you can see, this snow melts away, and once it melts away, we want to drain it off. But we can see that we've collected some water in there. We've got some mud around the outside of the jar, but I feel like if we take this and take a look inside, we can see that the water inside the jar is probably pretty good. So we're going to turn off the stove. We're going to let it stop boiling, and we can see that around the edges that water is really gross. But once we grab that other jar out, we'll probably have some pretty clean water. So this is still pretty hot, so I'm going to use a pot grabber here, and we're going to grab this thing out. That looks pretty good. I mean, it's in a dirty jar, but I'm going to put this down here and look inside. That looks pretty darn clean. Now, as you can see here, that's what the water looked like before. And even though it was boiling aggressively, any water that went up and attached to the underside of the tinfoil there, the sediment was too heavy for it to go up in the water vapor, because it basically turned into a gas, and then it cooled when it hit the tinfoil, and then with that ice, with the concave shape, it centered the dripping down, and all the vapor cooled to a liquid again and dropped into this jar here, which I'm just gonna test the temperature. It's still like really hot, boiling hot. So we're gonna let that cool down, and then I'm going to pour it into a glass to compare it with our other filtered water. So these wires are pretty cool right now, even though the water's pretty hot. So I'm gonna take this And I'm going to pour, oh, I'm going to pour this into there. And already you can see that's really clear water. So we'll take it over. What do you have to show me, Felix? Wow, that's very nice. It's my little helper. And now we can see that we have the sediment left over from the murky water. We have the once filtered water, the twice filtered water, the settled water from the murky water overnight, and then here is that boiled water. So as you can see, so far that's the best way to get your water nice and clear. And that took about 15 minutes on the stove to get yourself half a cup. So I'm pretty sure that one can perfect that into a more efficient system, and then maybe combine it with the other filtration system where one has it filter through your built filter with the different layers of rocks and sand and activated carbon, and then maybe somehow heat it up so that one adds that level of filtering for organic bacteria and viruses that might exist in it. But yeah, here you can see that's a clear difference, and I'm probably gonna take a taste of that clear water once it's cooled down more so that I can see whether it has that earthy taste that the yellowy water had. So this stuff, it tasted kind of earthy. This clear stuff, it's not lukewarm. It's a bit warm still, but not too hot. So I'm gonna give that a taste. Do you want to taste it, Felix?
One.
Yeah, how does it taste? You smoke it, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's still got slightly bit of an earthy taste to it, but it's definitely a lot better than the yellowy water that had just gone through the filtration system. Now, if you recall, originally...
Shiny?
Yeah, that's shiny. I had mentioned that one could use coffee.
Smelled it?
Yeah, you can smell it in one's filtration system. And I didn't want to because I figured it might color the water and give a kind of make it hard to indicate whether it actually worked. But the reason that coffee is good to use in a filter is it takes out the flavors. So I'd probably take coffee and run it through a perk and maybe use old grounds so that you're not making coffee through the filter, but the grounds themselves have a deodorizing effect and can take some of the taste away. So as you can see, this it worked pretty good, and all three cups have been sampled by the two experts here, and we're still doing okay. So I'd say that we've successfully managed to filter water, but we're going to take it another level further and try and make the boiling system that we had a bit more efficient and combine that with our sediment, rock, sand, activated carbon filter joined in with that and make it work real nice. So this is what I've come up with for a two-stage water filtration system that'll first filter out sediment here in our filtration layered system that we originally went through. I've remade it so that there isn't any sediment in it. I washed the rocks, the smaller stones, and the sand, and the activated carbon. And I also switched from the charcoal to an actual activated carbon from my fish tank supplies. So again, something that you would likely be able to find in some homes or else easily at a pet store or a grocery store. The second stage is that the pipe here that I have goes in and into the bottom of the screw top lid for the bottle. I've drilled a tight fitting hole there. If any extra water happens to escape around the sides, it's fine because it can catch it underneath here. There's some space. But the idea is that the water will flow down into this coil, and there's a good 10 or so coils on this copper pipe. And as it flows through there, we'll have some alcohol burning, and that'll heat up the water to a boiling temperature, hopefully. And then it'll come and collect into this jar, which is perforated on the top to allow steam to get out so it doesn't get too pressurized. But the idea here is that we're filtering out the sediment, and then we're boiling the water to kill any sort of organic harmful items or any viruses or such. So we're going to give this a try and see how the water comes through. So once again, just a note that when you're doing something like this, you want to be safe. We're working with flame. Ideally, you would want to do it outside with some good ventilation. It's pretty cold outside right now, so I'm working in my living room, which is a large room, and there's a lot of air movement. If it gets a bit too smoky, I'll turn on a fan to suck that out. But and then I've also put tin foil underneath just in case anything drips out. We've got the jars on hot pads, and we're just gonna take a close look. I've got a fire extinguisher close by as well. So we're gonna light the fire in the little can, and we're gonna pour in this gross water into the filter. I'll probably pour the water into the filter first and then light the fire, just so that it has some time to start working its way through the filter. So that flame is actually looking quite manageable, and I think it'll start heating it up. I've done some tests, and using a little empty tea light like that, the flame should burn for about 2 minutes or so. So hopefully it's enough. We may have to, once it burns out, top it up with a bit more alcohol-based fuel and keep it going, but we'll let it keep running here and see how it goes. As you can see here, this is starting to foam up. So we're actually getting some liquid into there already, which means that water's coming through here. You can see it was filled up to the top when I started it, and it's come down, it's working its way through, and it's actually going into the jar. So I'm gonna go get some more water and top that up just so we have some more water pressure, and we'll hopefully get more flow in this thing. So it looks like we're dying out of flame, so I'll let that burn out and add some more alcohol in, and then I'll add the more liquid into the filter. Again, this is gross water. Let me give you a close-up here. We're getting some water collecting in there, and that water looks pretty clear. And that's how it looks here. The coil gets heated up, and the water that's flowing through it gets heated up to a boiling temperature. And again, it's just getting filtered through there, which that's pretty empty already, so I might add some more in there. So it's burnt out again. I'm not going to fill it up again because I think the concept is proven here. We're going to pour that into a glass to compare it to our other waters that we have. But there's some flaws with the system that I'd have to work to make it work a bit better. As you see here, there's water collecting on this bucket, which means that it was flowing through the edges around the seal in there. So that would have to get sealed up better so that the water is flowing only through the copper pipe. But the copper pipe heat up pretty good. I had to use just a regular nail polish alcohol because that's all I had at home. If you wanted to use this system more effectively, you'd probably have to get like a fuel gel or something that you could pick up at Canadian Tire. But then this actually here worked really well. So I'm gonna grab a glass and pour it into that and compare it to the other ones that we have here. But all in all, I say the system works and it's looking like the water's pretty clear. I'm gonna give it a taste too to see if it's still got that earthy taste to it like the other ones have had. But I'm thinking that this is a step up and an improvement. So just a reminder, the cup on the far right is the single filtered water in the original filter system, which had just the charcoal. The second one from the right is the twice filtered in again, the same system. The third one was where we had let that water settle and then poured it through that filtration system. And as you can see with all three of those, they still have that yellow hue to it. The fourth one from the right is the clear water that we used that boiling on the pot system, where the water condensed onto the tin foil and then the ice from the top had it drop back down into the jar that we had in the pot. And this last cup here, we're gonna take this, which is still a bit hot, but we'll open it up and we'll pour it in here. And as you can see, it's a bit cloudy still compared to just the stovetop one, but it is definitely an improvement to one of the other three. So that's probably because of the activated carbon as opposed to the charcoal. I'm thinking the charcoal wasn't refined and it likely didn't take out the sediment as well, or possibly left a colored look to the water. So with the activated carbon, we probably got clearer water, and we may have had some of that advantage from the boiling system that prevented any sediment to be carried. Although with a system like this, it's a closed system where the water just gets pushed through. So it is water that comes through the filter that's going through. Whereas when we boiled it on the stove, the water that was boiling up and being caught on the tin foil was completely free of sediment and therefore ends up a lot clearer. So that definitely ended up with the cleanest water, but probably isn't the most energy effective. So I did promise that we would taste this last one. So this is the most recent water that we had. It's kind of milky still. It's not completely clear, but we're gonna give it a taste here. So it definitely doesn't taste like store-bought filtered water, but compared to all of the others, including the one that we boiled on the stove, this tastes the least earthy. So I think the improved filtration system with the activated carbon instead of the charcoal, plus sending it through that heated coil, which gives us the advantage of killing any parasites or viruses that might be in it, ends up with a pretty effective filtration system. So final thoughts. We started with a drawing here of our concept idea, which is the concept that we went with. There was a couple other concept ideas that I had here. A similar system where one just used old tuna cans with perforated holes in the bottoms of them, stacking on top of each other, which would allow you to easily switch out one entity if it gets clogged. But I didn't really feel like eating through 4 tins of tuna, so we went with the bottle. And then you can see here just the sketches that we did for the boiling the pot on the water, and then modifying that to include the copper coil, starting with the regular filtration with the pop bottle, going through the copper coil, catching in the jar. And what did we learn on the effectiveness of it? One key point was pre-wash your rocks, stones, and sand, as well as the activated carbon. The other recommendation is, while charcoal does work in a pinch if you don't have the activated carbon, it is not as effective because it's not really a refined product. And one can kind of see the difference between that in that we have, this is through the original filter with the charcoal, and the rocks and sand not being washed. And then this is through the final prototype. As you can see, it's not perfectly clear, but it's still a lot cleaner and the key difference being the taste. It doesn't have that earthy taste, which the other one definitely did. What's interesting is the stovetop method produced pretty much perfectly clear water. So it was the most effective at filtering out sediment. However, when you taste this one, it still has a bit of an earthy taste to it, while the final prototype, which had it going through the new filtration system with the activated carbon, didn't necessarily make the water perfectly clear. There's still some sort of sediment in it, but when we taste it, it doesn't have any earthy taste to it at all. So that's a interesting observation there. But I would say overall, clarity aside, given that those final two ones, I tasted all three, and all three of them are water that I would drink in a pinch. But I'm a lot more comfortable drinking the last two, and then it gets into which is more effective. You end up using a lot more energy on the stove boiling the water in a pot than you do through the other system that I created. And with a couple of modifications there to make it a bit more effective, I feel like that's a fairly cost-effective way where you can purify probably about a liter in 5 to 10 minutes. So it's quite effective. So I hope you found this interesting and that you learned something, and will be prepared to live in a world where you do not have your own clean water, where you have to create it for yourself.
Tread your love to fear. Treat me like the ever after. I'm scared of me.